Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Svava Brooks here. I am so happy that you're joining us again here at the Journey to the Heart interview series, where we are sharing how to thrive after trauma by loving our body, mind, and spirit, where wonderful experts and professionals are sharing their passion and unique approach to thriving. I am very excited to introduce our guest today. I want to welcome you, Peter Levine. So happy that you're here with us.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. It was good to talk to you this minute or two before.
Great. Thank you so much. And before we go into our questions, I just want to tell our audience a little bit about you. So, Dr. Peter Levine is the originator and the developer of the somatic experiencing and the president of the Foundation for Human Enrichment. He holds doctorate degrees in both medical biophysics and psychology. During his 30-year study of stress and trauma, Dr. Levine has contributed to a variety of scientific, medical, and popular publications. His best-selling book, Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, is available in 10 languages.
Actually, 24.
Oh my goodness.
You have an old one.
You need to update your bio, right? So he is presently working on 2 other books, and actually you just told me that one is out. We'll talk about that one later. But It Won't Hurt Forever. I like that title. Is a guide to the prevention and healing of trauma with children. And that book maybe is out already, huh?
Actually, the book is called Trauma Proofing Your Kids.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah, Trauma Proofing Your Kids. Yeah. Parents' Guide for Instilling Confidence, Joy, and Resilience. The idea there was to really give parents the tools they can use not only to help their children move through traumatic experience, but to become stronger, more confident, more resilient as they meet the stresses and traumas that every child has during life. You know, the falls, the medical procedures, and so forth.
Yes, because life has its ups and downs, right?
It does, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, the one motto that we have here is trauma is a fact of life. It happens to all of us. In different degrees, of course. But while trauma is a fact of life, it doesn't have to be a life sentence. So I think that's something that I've really, the thousands of people that I've worked with over the years have really taught me that absolutely clearly.
Thank you. I'm really glad we're starting this interview with that, because I know that for so many trauma survivors, you know, sexual trauma, specifically the people that I know and work with, you know, feel like very much the type of trauma that they have suffered, that it's something they will never move on from. But we're going to talk about basically, you know, how does that trauma impact a human, you know, let's say a child, and, you know, what's the long-term impact of it, and just, you know, what happens to our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, what happens to our bodies? Are you okay?
Yes.
Trauma, of course, is something that goes on in the brain and the psyche and the mind, but it also goes in and also affects deeply the body. So when we're frightened, we gasp, our shoulders go up, our diaphragm goes up, we, you know, tighten our guts. And of course that's clearly something that's happening in the body. When this happens over and over again, or it happens in such an overwhelming way, the body gets stuck in that gesture, in that fear. I was watching. We were working in former Yugoslavia, right toward the end of the war, and you'd see these older women would be crossing the street, and then a explosion would happen, and they would run back. Their shoulders would go up, and then they would go back, and then they'd start again, and again there was an explosion, and their shoulders went up. As they did this a third time, the fourth time, on the other side of the road, their shoulders were still up. So what our bodies do is and you really can't break up body and mind this way, of course, but for the sake of understanding, that the body then tells the mind that you're in threat. If you have a gut twisting, that's going to tell you that everything's bad, that everything's dangerous, that everything's threatening. And so until we change this, to change our bodies keep signaling back this distress. Now, one of the things is when we're traumatized, the last thing a person who's traumatized wants to do is connect with their bodies. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that it's really through shifting these patterns in our bodies that we begin to really transform the trauma in a core way and come deeper to ourselves. Now, but you have to do this gradually, because when people are traumatized, because of this, the bodies become the enemy. And we do anything to avoid being with our bodies, including dissociating. So, and this is especially true in sexual trauma. And in sexual trauma, there's an added component, and that is that the people who are supposed to protect us and take care of us and nurture us are the ones that do the abuse. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very confusing, because children don't fight or flee. They can't do that. They attach. That's what young children, babies do for safety. They attach to the parent or the parent figure, the caregiver. Mm-hmm. And if the caregiver is also the source of the trauma, that makes it so much more difficult and confusing. And that's one of the things that happens in sexual trauma, is it really leaves this profound confusion. And it takes some gentle sorting out of this. But the key, the victory really, is the reclaiming of the body. Mm-hmm. When, I forget who it was, I think it's Bernard Shaw, said, the best revenge is success. Mm-hmm. And when we're able to really connect with our bodies, with our power, with the sense of self that is embodied, our life really shifts. And it doesn't happen all at once necessarily, but it happens step by step. And again, because the body has become the enemy, because we feel the body has betrayed us, you have to very gradually come into the body. And that's why I've worked with a lot of different exercises in the two books that people can do to help them get more connected to themselves in a gradual way. Mm-hmm. And again, the key here is gradual. I use the term titration. It's one little bit at a time, because once you connect with the body, then you really see the body is the core resource. It's really what takes us through the trauma and brings us back into life. Mm-hmm. So sensing the body is really, from my perspective, is the most important tool. But again, it has to be done in a way which is gradual, because when the person first begins to feel their body, for that moment, it feels worse. Mm-hmm. So here's the body, and then the body goes into this, you become in contact with the body, and it clamps down. The distress becomes even greater. But then, surprisingly, it starts to open. Mm-hmm. And then it contracts, and then it opens, and then it contracts, and then it opens. Mm-hmm. I call this pendulation. Because every experience we have, no matter how bad it feels, if we're able to be with it, to observe it, this takes the frontal part of our brain to be able to really stay back and observe our sensations and our emotions and our thoughts. That's the key, be able to observe them. But again, when there's very early trauma, particularly if the trauma is repetitive, What was I talking about? Remind me.
Well, just that, how we need to it's a gentle approach. It takes
Right.
time,
Yeah, it takes time. No,
Yeah.
I was coming to another point. But anyhow, as we gradually re-inhabit our bodies,
Yes.
then we see our bodies as the ally.
Yeah.
So the key is in doing it in small steps.
Yes.
And again, to notice that that when the person feels it at first, it is more, it's more painful, it's more frightening, but then it opens,
Yeah.
and really finding this rhythm of contracting and opening, contracting and expanding. Then you really know that whatever you're feeling, it will soon pass. But it's when we get frightened about it and then we grip down against it,
Yeah.
that's when it gets stuck. And another analogy I give is here's an emotion that's coming up, and we're frightened by this emotion. So what we do is we try to stop it, or a sensation, we try to stop it. Well, then, of course, there's an expression, that which we resist persists. I think it's an AA expression, probably.
Yes.
So we push down to stop it, and it pushes up even harder. So then we push down even harder, and then it pushes up even harder. And then it seems like if we ever feel the sensation or emotion in our body, it will completely overwhelm us. But that's largely because we've been fighting against it so long. We've made a monster out of it. So as we gradually touch into the periphery and come back into ourselves, each time we become more whole. We become more deeply connected with our true self, with our authentic self.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I really appreciate it. I mean, you've said so much, and it really, for me, represents, the key points in my healing journey. I mean, I was, hurt by someone very close to me repeatedly for a long time. I trusted, I adored, I was attached. I needed that connection. And so, I mean, I disassociate. I left my body. I have memories as a child just being out there and never told anyone. Of course, they're going to lock me up if I tell them about this.
Of course.
And then my body responding to the touch the way a body does. I hated my body. I mean, it was like this war going on between my mind and my body. And, I talk about it. I mean, I did support group for 5 years in the beginning of my healing. And it took me a couple years just to even, allow the possibility of going in there, because there was so much that I had stored in there, and my feelings that I thought if I just open that door, it's going to explode and I will completely lose control. So it's definitely been, I mean, it's been a 20-year journey, and then it's just now in the last, 2 to 3 years that I'm really coming home, into my body and seeing, oh my God, I'm a miracle. This body has been through so much, and it was just trying to keep me safe. It just did the best it could.
And just feeling your hand right now on your chest, and just noticing what that feels like, Slava. Just noticing that right now. And that's the victory. That's the coming home. That's what you're experiencing right now. There's a beautiful poem from the quatrains of T.S. Eliot. It's like we travel all over the world, and we return home to know it for the first time. And I don't want to ever diminish the injury, the damage that's been done to children in trauma. But at the same time, to know that when we come home, it's like we've come home for the first time. We know it for the first time. When I started working with people in the 70s, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but I asked one client, I said, if you could be with where you are right now, or if you wouldn't have had this trauma at all, which would you have chosen? And virtually everyone chose to be where I am right now. because that's the gift of trauma transformation. It really is. It really is. It's a great gift, returning us to embodiment, flow, coherence, and wholeness.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel the same way. I mean, I today am truly grateful for all of it. Even the worst of it, because now that I'm on the other side, I feel things in a way that I don't think I would have been able to feel. And I feel things for others
Mm,
that I'm so strongly connected to because of my experience, that and it allows me to hold, like, I'm sure for you, I'm just like, you show up for others. I've seen you help so many veterans with PTSD in your videos, and it's so clear how you just embody this trust,
mm,
and you model for them, I trust your body,
that's right.
to know exactly what it needs to do. So
Yeah, yeah, that's right. This is again a key. Uh, is that the therapist or the guide,
yes.
they really have to know that you have the capacity to overcome, as the client, the trauma.
Yes.
They have to have that. But the only way they're going to really get that, really, is having that experience in themselves. Of course, in the shamanic healing traditions, the shaman always has to go through initiation first, whether it's an illness or a trauma, something like that, or they're put through a tremendous ordeal, because without that, they don't have the compassion, and they don't have the trust in their own organism, so they can't help reflect that with the person that they're with their clients. Or
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the universe is beautiful in that way. And I tell my clients, I do a lot of online speaking webinars, and I always say, well, I always have to be careful when I choose a topic for a webinar, because I know the universe will always provide me with an opportunity to experience it on my own skin.
well, we had an expression I used to teach a lot at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. We have an expression there. We always teach what we most need to learn,
Exactly.
and which we're often our own worst pupil.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Sometimes when I'm speaking, I'm like, hey, that's an advice I could use. So
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. That's beautiful. So, can you speak a little bit? I mean, you've talked about how, this tightening, this, gripping feeling in the body. I mean, that is what becomes the PTSD, right? Isn't that correct?
That's right. That's right. The PTSD, is how our body reacts,
Yes.
and it does this in an involuntary way.
Hmm.
And this is another thing I think that sometimes people who are sexually traumatized or traumatized in general don't realize. So, for example, sometimes they have the memories of the trauma. Maybe they also have emotions about the trauma. But then they're walking on the street and somebody walks from behind them, and all of a sudden their body just completely goes into the trauma response. And often it makes people feel even worse because they understand it. They have certain feelings about it, emotions about it, but their body is still reacting. And again, that's the key of why we have to work also with the body. Um, these are the body reactions are called procedural memories, and they're very, very deep. We have 4 types of memories, basically, two types and 4 subtypes. One, we have the conscious memories called explicit. We have the somewhat the unconscious memories, or the subconscious memories, called implicit. And these include emotional and procedural memories, that is to say, what the body has learned to do. So we really have to untangle that. And that was the motivation why I just wrote the book that you mentioned, Trauma and Memory, because it really, until we work with those memories, then our body still is reactive. I think of so many people, women and men, when they're touched by their loving partner, their whole body stiffens or becomes revulsed. Yet they know consciously that this is somebody who's completely safe. So this is, again, why it's so important to work with these body memories, so-called body memories.
So is it important because a lot of survivors, they say they resist the healing because they think they have to go and dig out all the memories, or is it just the body's response in the now that they have to learn to respond to, not necessarily go dig up the history?
That's right. It's in the body's response in the now. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with so many people, who are sexually abused. And there is such a relief when I say, you don't have to remember anything. We just have to see how your body is reacting and then learn how to undo that. Now, of course, in that process, there are often images, there are feelings, emotions that come up, but it's part of a process. And it's part of a process that we take these raw body memories and emotional memories and we transform them into a coherent narrative that we can tell about ourselves. A kind of mythology, and I don't mean that at all in a negative sense. It's a mythology of our life story, of our heroic journey, of what kinds of obstacles we've experienced during our lives and how we've learned to overcome them. And this may have elements of the traumatic experience, but it's much more. It's much more. It also invokes what Carl Jung called archetypes. Mm-hmm. These are also healing forces, healing vectors that live within our psyche that when we connect to them have powerful transforming. For example, people who were just really neglected or mishandled as babies and young children. Sometimes in the therapy, an image will appear of the great mother, of the holding mother. You see this, of course, in many religions. In Christianity, it's the great mother also. But most religions have that archetype. Mm-hmm. And the amazing thing, really, is that it exists within us regardless of our personal history. So that's also something that really comes together and helps us in this process of healing, of deep healing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Changing that story, like for me, it was, I'm not a helpless little child. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't inherently bad, mm-hmm. But to look back now and it's like, wow, like I said earlier, I'm truly, a miracle, which I think each and every one of us, we are, but, really changed how I thought about myself and how I feel about myself. And then, make myself a priority. And I feel like I reparented myself. I became the loving mother and the That's protector that I always needed. And I still practice that to that day. I have this wounded part of me that, because she was so neglected, I make sure I check in with her, that she doesn't feel abandoned ever again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's the key. It really is. And when we come to the body, we really do come to that self-love.
Yes.
And that self-caring.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to practice it because it hasn't been that way all our life. So at first it seems strange or even artificial. Mm-hmm. Or it also brings up resentful feelings like, well, why do I have to do this?
Exactly.
Somebody should have done that. But we can, we gradually cut through all of that. And again, just come to it. Yes, I love myself. I accept myself. Mm-hmm. Self-acceptance, really, a very wise person told me once, named Richard Alney, is that self-acceptance, it's not a concept. It really isn't. It's not about, it's not about self-importance or anything like that. It's about being able to experience ourselves as we are experiencing it in the moment. Mm. And that's something I've never forgotten, and it's been a really important guide for me. really
Yes.
what it is. When we're able to open to our current experience, whatever it is,
Yes.
again, in a safe way, in a
Yes.
contained way, so we're not overwhelmed by it, then we collect more and more into our own organisms, into our
Exactly.
own selfhood.
Yeah. And that's where, right, we learn to trust ourselves and then trust that, yes, like you said, things happen in life, trauma happens, but it doesn't have to define us or overcome us. Now that we know who we are and what we can do to restore ourselves, be kind to
Mhm.
ourselves, we can overcome, or better the circumstance or the situation. So can you speak then maybe more directly to the somatic experience? I mean, I know this is just, you're teaching this in so many countries and lots of people are learning. So it's deeply resonating. And that's
Mhm.
what I have found. My body knows the truth. So when I find a program like yours or David Berzelli with the TRE, and it's like my body responded to it stronger than my mind did. It's like, yes, that feels like the
Mhm.
truth. It's like exactly, getting back to connect to my body is where my truth is.
Mm. So again, just noticing your hand and your smile, and noticing where else you feel the smile.
Yes.
So again, this when we come to this opening, it just wants to give us more and give us
Yes.
more and give
Yes.
us more. And experience, automatic experiencing. Uh, I think you're asking specifically about that.
Yes.
Okay. Um, this is uh, based a lot on understanding the difference, because we are easily traumatized. Human beings are easily traumatized, or readily traumatized. And but I realized from my study of the brain that we um, that we really have the same parts of our brain that all the other mammals do that are affected by threat. These are the non-conscious parts of the brain in the brain stem and the limbic system, the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain, it's called. We share that. Now, if animals in the wild were traumatized routinely the way humans are, because the prey animal is preyed upon many times, even in a day, and if it escapes, then it can't, it can't be limited. It can't lose its effectiveness, because if it did, it wouldn't survive. And so I reasoned that animals in the wild, I'm only talking about in the wild, uh, at least have some protective mechanism against becoming traumatized. So somehow they reset their nervous systems. And then I wondered, well, why don't we do this? What are we interfering with? What do we not know? And as I worked with more and more clients, starting in the 60s and 70s, I started to see very specific sets of reactions in their bodies. Certain types of shaking and trembling, uh, often deep, spontaneous, deep breaths, their hands changing from ice cold to warm, and so forth. And so I started contacting people who work with wildlife all over the world. And I told them about my observation, and they shared theirs. And yes, all the animals that they've studied frequently go through those same kind of reactions. I remember one of the wildlife people in Mali who I was interviewing, and I told him about my interest, and he said, well, when we capture animals to relocate them, they have to put them in cages, and then trucks take the cages to the reserve. That if they don't go through that shaking and trembling, we know that they're not going to survive in the wild when they're released. So this really, I start to really think, okay, I'm on the right track here. And so in a way, what somatic experience does is it helps people get out of the way, so their instinctual mechanisms to reset can be accessed. And the code for this, if you like, the body, are the sensations. So I was basically really helping the people I worked with to learn how to get out of the way and let those inherently balancing mechanisms take their natural course of action. And that really is the key. And again, that's why I titled the first book "Waking the Tiger," because it's waking that instinctive capacity in ourselves that allows us to rebound and to restore.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, I mean, I have the luxury of having read your books and your audio. I mean, I love this one here because it comes with a disc where you walk people through those exercises, and I love how, I mean, you so beautifully slow everything down and really help people to notice things, get in touch with their senses of their bodies, even just by imagining things. There's something awakened, in that process. So do you feel then that the path to recovery after trauma is to really continue that internal journey of, connecting with your internal, what do I say, the internal world, basically.
Yes.
Your body.
I can do an exercise maybe if people want to follow along.
That'd be great.
Because what happens is when we're experiencing really mortal threat and our guts really tighten up and churn, and then they send that message back up into the brain, to the brainstem. Here's an exercise, very, very simple. You take an easy, deep breath, and I'll demonstrate it. And then you make the sound "voo," as though it's coming from your belly. Okay. So it's like you're vibrating it from your belly. So, and then when you let the sound and the air go all the way out, naturally, just allow the next breath to come in. Okay, so I'll demonstrate. Whenever I drink it from right here in my belly. Wait, the breath comes in. Now, anybody who wants to join in, please join in with us. And just rest. And just feel your fingers and notice if there's any change there. Notice your feet, how they're contacting the ground. And notice the sensations or feelings that are going on in your belly. And see if there's some sense, even if it's the smallest sense, of coming home. Of I'm coming home. Just notice. And if it produces distress, that can shift. That will shift. And then if your eyes were closed or if they're open, just looking around a little bit in the room where you are. And just notice 2 or 3 things that catch your attention. It could be a painting. It could be seeing a tree outside the window. It could be a particular thing you have on your desk or an altar. And just go back and forth between that image and whatever you're experiencing in your body, and just shifting back and forth. And you said slowly, slowing things down. That's another key characteristic of somatic experiencing. In trauma, these things happen so fast. So we really have to slow them down so that we can integrate them into our experience, into our internal experience, into our nervous system.
That's beautiful. I mean, I could feel like all of a sudden my stomach felt fuller, like my insides, was like fuller. It felt warmed up there.
Yes.
And I could feel my feet on the ground all of a sudden. I'm here interacting with you, and so I'm being very intentional about being focused on our conversation. So it was nice. Okay, yeah, I'm still standing here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just looking up, you know, seeing a picture on the wall, seeing the trees out the window.
Hmm.
Um, it just kind of it created more like it got brighter sort somehow.
Yes, that's a very typical one. Can be brighter or more alive, or sometimes people say, "Oh my God, now I see in 3 dimensions."
Yes,
You
yes,
know, so because again, when we change our inner state, we also change our perception.
that's
So
true.
if we're constricted inside, our perceptions are going to be constricted.
Yes,
When we begin to open, then what we see, what we let in,
yes,
change.
yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
No, gladly.
So much. I really appreciate that because it's so simple. And I think maybe
Hmm.
that's what people are like, what do you mean? You just want me to do that, you know? And it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
just try that. And I'm one of those, you know, I want a quick fix and I'm going to do it, you know, 10 times a day for the next 10 days and we're going to get this done. Right.
Right, right.
It doesn't work that way. But, you know,
Right.
what can you speak to, you know, the people that are resisting the body work? I know you mentioned it earlier, and I know you've, you know, just in your presence and your message here, you know, made it very clear. It is a gentle and it's a kind of a long-term approach to this process. But what can you speak to those people who maybe are finding that resistance?
Right. Well, look, I think that, well, first of all, that's natural.
Yes.
When your body has become the battlefield, it's who wants to be there? That's crazy to be there. So, and we were little and small. That's all we could do is leave our
Yes.
bodies.
Yes.
But we're not little and small anymore. You know, the things that overwhelmed us as a baby and as a toddler don't need to overwhelm us now. And so when we find out that it's not so bad as we catastrophize, that it's actually helps us open,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
then we're on the path. That's what
Yep.
takes us on the path.
Yes.
So you don't, I never try to convince a person of something, but only to help guide them so that they have the experience and then they can decide. And
Yes.
there's also a thing that also happens around this, which is important, is sometimes people, they have this like this profound sadness. And it's a sadness that they had unnecessarily been living with this much of their lives. And, you know, when I work with people, for example, who are dying and they make contact with this, there was both a profound sadness, but it was a cleansing sadness.
Mm.
And at the same time, a gladness that they came to themselves before they died, while they were still alive.
Mm.
And I think this is really, it's about finding us our aliveness. Because trauma, in a way, is a disorder of not being able to be in the here and now. And so when you're really in the here and now, you can reflect to the past, but you're not dictated by the past. You're not governed by the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. I mean, I'm looking at the clock here, and you know, I can tell you and I could go on for a while, but you have obviously we're going to put a link to your website and your other web. You have a couple of really important websites that I want to make sure our audience can find you and your work. But you have a resource on your one of your websites that's called Sexual Healing Transforming the Sacred Wound. It's a CD program.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about that and how that could be helpful
Sure.
to them?
Yeah. Is it okay if I just go over the few of those?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think the books are on the Somatic Experiencing website.
Yes.
I have to check with my assistant, but I'm pretty sure they are.
Yes.
And then referrals for therapists and training programs and so forth are on the traumahealing.org
Yes.
website.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, So anyhow, the healing the sacred wound, sexual healing, healing the sacred wound. That one's really, it's about the process of embodiment after, specifically about after sexual trauma, although it's general as well. And it's a CD that I did with Sounds True, and I help guide the person back into their body experience. Much later, I did another one with Sounds True. That was called Healing Trauma, Pioneering Program for Restoring the Wisdom of Your Body, something like that.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. And that one is really good because it's both the book and also the CD, and it guides. And I think in a way that's a better place even to start.
Okay.
With
yeah,
that.
It's very short and
exactly. It's short, and there are specific steps, and the person can go back to the different steps and so forth. But I mean, together they really are useful in guiding, I think. And then my first book was called Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma. And that was really, that's right. That's the one that really explains the whole experience of trauma to primarily to lay people. And then finally, my last book, again, that really helps people, I think, understand the different types of memory and come more to peace with their haunting memories, is the book that just came out a few weeks ago. And that's called Trauma and Memory, Brain and Body in a Search for the Living Past. So it's about how the past lives in us as body memories. And again, how we shift out of those body memories. And we don't have to remember everything explicitly.
Yes.
That it's an internal experience, and it's primarily a growth experience, a journey experience. And coming home to ourselves, to our bodies, is a life journey. It doesn't end. I don't even know if it ends in death, but it certainly doesn't end when we're alive.
Exactly. That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, I just want to read a quick quote that I think says a lot about you, and I'm sure this wisdom is really starting to resonate with me as well. The more I open, the wider my scope of possibility of connecting with others and what we can do in the world. And your quote is, "I believe that we humans have the innate capacity not only to heal ourselves, but our world from the debilitating effects of stress, overwhelm, and trauma."
I believe that. I know that.
Good.
I know that. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate all that you've shared today. If there's anything that you feel like we left out that you want to end on, but
well, we could go on for hours, as you
yes.
observed, but I think we've made some important discussion, and I just hope it's helpful and valuable to your people.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Hello. And also, one of the things that I can keep in contact with you is that I'm working on a whole web-based recovery program for people who have had trauma or have different of these physical symptoms like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And because I in my later years, because I've been at this for 40 years, really. My interests lie in giving tools that people can use for themselves and with each other in community to heal, because I think that healing trauma is a birthright.
Wow. Thank you. Well, I think that's a profound and an awesome way to end this interview, Peter. I can't tell you how grateful and honored I feel to have shared this moment with you, and from my heart, just so grateful for all the important work that you're doing and the tools that you are giving survivors and humans to restore not just faith in ourselves and in our goodness, but also then to bring that further out into the world. So,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure people will find you. I know you have a newsletter, people can sign up and join you. And it'd be very exciting to learn more about that online program. So thank you so much for our time today.
Great. Really nice talking to you, Slava, and to all of you who I can't see. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you. And to our audience, just wait up and check out our email again tomorrow for another wonderful interview. Thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Ciao. Ciao, ciao.